Here we go. So it says we're live.
We are
And I
live.
just yeah, that's what it says. I hope it's true. I think I'm gonna say hi to Genocide over here. Hi Genocide. Hi Jet Petty and Jilly.
And Jilly
Super
Bean.
super great that you're all here today. I so appreciate it. So everybody, hopefully some folks will kind of file in. So we'll give them like a second here. It says it's live. Yeah, thanks, John. I mean,
Cool.
I hope you can hear us and see us, right?
I know. Let
You
us
know,
know.
yeah, let us know. And I know we have a delay, and so Chris and I are both gonna fix our hair.
We're
Like,
like wet look today, Kim K, or the mat. Let us weigh in.
what is that? I know. Yeah, we were just talking about the difference between 2022 and 1992. The difference between the matte finish and the moisture finish.
Speaking of 1990, well, 93, I watched Hocus Pocus 2 last night.
You did. How was it?
And it was I really enjoyed it. One, I mean, Hocus Pocus is like my shit, you know what I mean? Of
Mhm,
course.
mhm.
But there was a moment where they were like, it's been since 1993 which is like the year I was born. And I was like, oh my God, like I was just kind of tripping out a little bit in terms of the time jump. But their age worked for the witches, like for them being witches, right? It was
I
great.
I can't wait to watch that. Actually, I just rewatched Hocus Pocus like last Halloween. I like to watch like like I like to kind of hang out with my mom on Halloween and like not watch. It's not she doesn't like scary stuff, so like we
Mhm.
watched like Hocus Pocus one year, and we watched Practical Magic and like
Yeah.
whatever, right? And so we watched Hocus Pocus I think last year. So I kind of can't wait to see it, but that's cute. I can see you and I can hear you. I can't smell you though. And Michelle looks like she smells divine. Thank you so much, Sai. Aren't you just sweet? Oh, it's Jasmine. Hey, Jasmine. Welcome, welcome. So glad to have you here. Fantastic. Well, everybody, this is my friend and colleague, Chris Marmolejo of the Red Read. So they also teach tarot as I do and read tarot. And so we're just, I don't know, we're going to have a really just like mellow. What is up with the part in my hair? We're just going to talk about my bangs the whole time.
I
Uh,
love it. Also, I'm like switched from calling bangs a fringe. I'm like,
the
your fringe.
fringe. What is up with my fringe? Okay. So, but Chris reads and teaches tarot, same as I do, and we're just gonna have I don't know, we're just gonna chill out and talk about tarot cards. Mostly Eileen, hey, yay. These are all my buddies in the chat, Chris.
Hello,
They're like,
welcome. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'm so
I
glad.
bow to you. I mean, again, I'm so happy that you're teaching again, and your just way of reading the tarot. It's all like, okay, so much of for me, the reading is also about the delivery, like the
Mm,
actual vocal quality. Like, I mean, I know people do written readings and things like that, and that is valid, and all that.
mhm.
Um, but there's just something about like the voice that helps things pivot in my own mind when I'm receiving a reading, and then also when I'm delivering a reading. I'm like, whoa, what came out of my mouth right now? That was great. And so yeah, so you really like your delivery of the readings solidify or exemplify your experience. I think like that you are embodied with the tarot.
Oh, thank you so much. Like I love to hear that. And I know exactly what you're talking about. I mean, I feel like so much. I mean, like now I'm sending out like personalized recorded readings, which I'll
Mm,
kind of get to, which are very cool. But I used to try to do written readings in the past, and it didn't really go that well. It was a lot of work to
mm,
try to do it,
mm,
and it didn't go that well. I didn't think it went as well. But what you're saying is like making sense. So I don't do those anymore. I don't try to do them anymore because I'm like, that
mm,
doesn't work. And I'm sending the recordings.
mm,
But so much, oftentimes during a reading, like I'll say to someone, like, I know you know this, but you
mm,
need to hear me say it
mm,
anyway, or
mm,
some part of you needs to hear me say it. Because
mm.
sometimes I really am just telling people things they already consciously know, but like they need to hear another non judgmental voice,
Right,
right? Probably going to be less judgmental than your own. And I'm like,
right.
look, your person. here's some shit that's going on. You're a little bit right. You're a little bit wrong. Aren't we all?
Right, right, right. But it's just, but still, like the one. Okay. Also, I would love for you to talk about the Celtic Cross, like the standard reading, and your relationship to that. I really do. I really work with like I don't know. I don't do the full thing. I just do like the four, like what's behind you, what's in front of you, what's above you, below you, kind of thing. But it's so psychopomp in terms of like I hear through like I hear my own, like you're like, here's this part of your psyche, and then we're gonna go a little bit deeper, and then here's this other part of your psyche, and it's so helpful, and again, that's what I love about tarot is in laying spreads. I mean the Celtic Cross, but any spread in general is that you create like a mandala of consciousness of sorts, right? That like does give you a tactical like mapping of your psyche.
Right. It's true. I mean, I love that. I do want to talk about the Celtic Cross, but I also want to talk about like the concepts of the archetypes. Like we can use tarot cards to like map the psyche. Like it works. Like you work with it, I work with it, and like, Carl Jung, right, is the one who like came up with this whole thing, right? But I mean, like tarot cards way predate that. So it's not that like somebody was like here, like there's like, somebody's like, here's these archetypes. Like the tarot technically was like created separately. You had the major arcana in Italy. You had probably, the minors really coming out of Egypt, probably the Romani people are putting that shit together, taking it up the Eastern Seaboard or whatever that's called. You know what I mean? Like that's probably what happened. So it wasn't like somebody sat down and they're like, I'm going to make this psychological thing. But then like a couple hundred years later, Carl Jung is like, you know what we could do with this? and here we are like 100 years after him now saying like, you're right. And we can still do that. So I love mapping the mind and the archetypes and just putting something outside of yourself, like just putting your psyche outside of yourself and being like, oh, look, I can look at how these things interact and really think about all these parts of myself and how they interact and trigger each other and do all this stuff. And it just helps you grow so much, I think. Yeah.
So much. I call it like my compact shadow mirror, because I'm like a Venusian person. And I'm like, here's my little like compact like shadow mirror. Like, let me just see, like keep everything, like let me just see, at least even that. And the tarot for me is a safe space to project onto. Many people have that project onto the relationships or onto like all these other things. And it's like, no, here it's just, it'll bounce right back to you, and it'll have the humor, it'll have care if it needs to, sometimes it'll be cutting if it needs to. But hey, it's like the, I don't know, like the I don't want to, like the war room sounds so intense. It's like the training room or something. You know what I mean? You go into like a different field where it's like, okay, this is like the bumpers are there or something. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get it totally. Like, and I love what you said though about like this, you can kind of project on your tarot cards. If you're having a day when you want to project on other people, don't do it with your tarot cards. And it's also the place to like, when you have like, these like things that other moments of yourself that other people really don't need to be privy to. When you're like, you can take your cards out and you can be like, am I the stupidest person who ever lived? Nobody needs to like be with you in that moment, but your cards will be like, actually, surprisingly, yeah, you are. And then you're like, well, now come on, or whatever, you catch yourself. So like everybody out there, like the worst parts of your worst day, your tarot cards are the place to turn to. And once you get your shit together a little bit, then you can turn to another person and say, hey, do you have enough spoons to touch base with me about this thing today? Right. And you have it kind of organized so you're not in a meltdown state. So yeah, I love that. You can really have those conversations and they will trick you. Like if you don't if you are like, you don't like the answer you're getting, so you keep asking those cards over and over, eventually it's going to give you every dark card. It's like, oh, you like these like swords in the tower, and is that what you were? Because that's it. That's the truth. Keep asking. Keep asking.
We'll keep digging until we hit ivory.
I'll give you what you want. But yeah, my relationship with the Celtic Cross, I mean, technically, that's what I read with. Technically, I'm laying down 10 cards and then I do cards over it. I think most folks know that I read with a few different decks, right? So
Mhm.
I'll do the base reading, which is technically the Celtic Cross.
Mhm.
Here's my relationship with it though. Like years ago, I didn't, I was like Celtic. I don't really like that's Irish, right? Like I don't know this history. I don't know what that means. I don't know why we call it that. So I, at that point, just started calling it a 10 card spread, but I was still laying it out within
Yeah.
the and then for anybody who like doesn't know, that's where the cross is in the middle. You got 4 cards around. It's the standard tarot spread that you see most people do.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. I was reading cards for a while. My primary place of reading cards was in person in Kentucky, in the state of Kentucky. This is where I was doing it. And I would lay out those cards and that cross in the middle, right? And I would
Right.
just see people back up, right? And I didn't get it for a minute, and I would ask too sometimes when I first started really reading in public and really reading for other people. I'm like, no, you don't, and especially in Kentucky in the Bible Belt. I was like, so a lot of these cards, they relate to the Bible. And so I'm like, how are you going to feel if a devil comes up? And they're like,
Mm.
oh, I don't care. But then the devil would come up and they'd be like, oh my God. And I'm like, it's okay. You're not possessed. I used to ask, now I don't as much. But my guides,
Now you're like, you might be possessed a little bit. No.
yeah. And then I was like, oh, well, actually, it turns
Well,
out this time it is about that. So you might want to call a priest. First time for everything, right?
right.
But at some point in time, my guide, so how loose I like to use these things, but whatever it is that like comes in on the right side of my head to give me ideas about things was like, you don't have to lay them out in that configuration. And I was like,
Mm.
that's true. And so now it technically is a Celtic cross. That's what it is. But I don't make a cross out of it. I just make rows of cards, and that's what that looks like. So that's my
Mm.
relationship. Is that what you use with your clients?
I love that. I love that, like, shifting. Well, same, because the Celtic, I'm like, even in the like the Jewish Kabbalistic aspect of like behind the cards, I don't really delve too much into because I'm not Jewish, and so like I have different students and clients, and I'm like, that door is there for you should you want to pursue that further. But
Mhm.
I have my own entryways into the cards and these things, and so like, I don't know, I'm still warming myself up to it. Honestly, like sometimes I will do pre-laid cards or what have you, or like my spread. I have like my base spread, which is just a simplified version of the Celtic Cross. I don't do like the hope streams part or the outcome part,
Mm.
and then we go from there. And I'll just pull cards and see like what comes up like with the client, and we'll kind of work back and forth with the question and the articulation of the question.
So
Um,
you don't do the staff on the
right.
on the
I don't
side.
do the staff. Yeah, I don't do the staff.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, the staff, right. But I
And
want,
then
but I don't know. But I do like in the time because there was also like it felt too, um, like too like not like gatekeeping in a sense, but just too much of like that being a marker of like because it is there every in the little white book. It's like you're always going to see that kind of included, right?
yeah.
So I just kind of wanted to have like my own standpoint first. But now that I feel very, steeped in the tarot life, I'm like, yeah, let me build this relationship and get to know this Celtic cross in a like maybe not with that name, like as you were saying, like in my own kind of laying of them.
Right.
Because again, through experience with you and having like receiving it, I love it. I love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's see. Wait, John said I had something to say. Let's see. When I first got into tarot, I only knew the Celtic cross and it bored me. It took too long and I wasn't really good. If I knew I could just do 3, I might have continued with it. Oh,
Mm,
that's a good point. Yeah. I mean, that's a good point for anybody. I mean, you definitely don't need these big long spreads. A
right.
3-card spread. I mean, I do 3-card spreads pretty consistently throughout the day for myself. I mean, but I pretty much always have a deck of cards in my hand. I just recently recorded, I don't even think I realized I recorded a podcast with a guest recently, and in listening back to it, I'm like, am I shuffling cards the entire, like I can hear myself shuffling cards and I think I'm actually laying them out on my desk, but I
Yeah.
wasn't reading cards while I was talking to this person. Like I wasn't reading cards. Like I don't,
Mm.
but I think I was shuffling them and laying them out on the table just completely absent-mindedly.
Well,
Anyway.
I know that's basically a good point. Like there is a meditation in keeping your hands sort of busy and having like I'm like I have a ton of decks. I always have a deck with me, and anytime I leave somewhere without a
Uh-huh.
deck, I'm like, why did I do that? Like I'm
Yeah.
like I just need a deck. Like So I totally get that. I like for me it is sometimes I usually go with the jumpers too. Honestly, like that's how I pretty much read like the jumpers.
Mm-hmm.
So if
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not getting the jumper, it'll like I can just be sitting there for a minute and I'll have to tell my students, I'm like, okay, y'all, like I know you may be ready, but just give me a moment. Like I'm still going.
I know.
And
That's what I tell people too. I'm like, whenever I stop shuffling here, which is neither an art nor a science, I can't tell you why I do or why I don't.
right.
Let's see, Renee says people who don't know tarot flip over death. They do sometimes for
Mm,
sure. And like I've
mm,
definitely had that death card show up for me when I was like not in this reading. Like
mm.
not in this reading. And then trying to explain, like, okay, this isn't real death, but that person is like, I just told you, like, my husband's suicidal. I'm like, oh God, but it didn't mean
Yeah.
that. My husband's still alive.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But yeah, but people do flip over the death card because it'll be like, what
Mm,
am I gonna die? You know, it's like, oh,
right.
and this is something I tell people too, is like I made a deal with like whatever, my cards, my guides, my ancestors, myself, wherever we're angels, I don't care, wherever
Mhm,
we're all coming from on this. None of that matters. It's all
mhm,
primarily psychological, right?
right.
And I made a deal. I was just like, I don't want to know. Like if I get a client and
Mm,
they're gonna like die in a car accident the next day, I don't want to
mhm,
know.
mhm.
I don't want to know when their husband's gonna die. I don't want to know when, I don't want to know when anybody's gonna die. I do
Right.
not want that information. And so like, and sometimes I'll tell people that too, especially if they have like, if they're coming to me with something around them that's a
Mm,
suicidal person, a terminal illness, I'll be like, look, I have a deal with God, basically. Like, you don't tell me that shit.
right. Yeah.
That is an need to know basis. And the only people who need to know are the ones you're taking, my friend.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's intense. I was watching put the first episode on because I spoke to my grandmother about it, and I was like, "Okay." I was like but the Vicente Fernandez, like, bio series on Netflix or what have you, and I was, like, putting it on the background, but anyhow, death comes to him from a child, just sort of, like, tormenting him, like, always like, "Okay, I'm taking your friend," or, "I'm taking like, this other colleague of yours," and then and it just I was like, "Wow, what a heavy burden for that young child to." I mean, I'm kind of like that death child in a sense, um, but I feel like death, like I have like I don't know, I see her as like a mother aspect as well. Like I have like the depiction of death in the show. I was like, I don't like that death guy. Like that guy can go away, like in a sense, but I was just yeah. So I see that, but in terms of what you're saying, if I was that kid, I would be like, can you just not like mock me as you're about to come and take
Right.
someone away. So
That's horrible. I don't know. I don't know the show. Does
right.
that something and do you like see that in your practice?
No,
Like,
honest.
does
I've
death
had
come up
people
for you like that?
death death does come up for me, but it's and I do speak to people that it is about it is about death in terms of like it speaks to our survival instincts. Like of course the first thing that is part of the reading, and we get death, and our immediate thing is to say it's not about death, is to avert our gaze from death. So it really is about like our life, our will to live in a lot of ways. But also the ways that like our own cultural relationships to death. And I mean, I think that there's a way that we orient our life practices around death. And so um, I'm no stranger to death, like actual death and metaphysical or symbolic death in all of the ways. So I do feel like comfortable in helping people guide through that. I do have a lot of like first timers come to me as well, which I'm very grateful for. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and so but I was thinking about the tower more so previously, like before this. I was like, "Ooh, I wonder." Like, I don't know. Just I feel like the tarot came to me in more of like a tower space. Like it just like lightning struck my life open, and I was like, I need reaching for something, and like the tarot came.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, similarly, I had a similar entrance into tarot. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's funny how tarot will come into your life when you don't expect it. So no, that's very interesting because I do know people too who are mediums, who like
Right.
right? And and sometimes people ask me, are you a medium? I'm like, I am decidedly not. I mean, because I've had mediums say like, but you could be, and I'm like, I'm good. I'm
Yeah.
good though. Like that's not my, like it's just there's nothing wrong with it. I don't have like I'm just like, that's not my thing. But I love how what you're saying about death, though, too, being so much about our relationship with life. And I mean, like, I was having this really intense, ooh, see, I feel it in my body, but like, I was having an intense reading with a person the other day, and I was like, like, we got real deep. We were real in there before I said this, and I'm like, I mean, at the end of the day, like, death is your partner. Like, death is everyone's partner in life, technically. Like, we partner up with other people, but technically we're all already taken. You know what I mean? We're all in a polyamorous relationship out here, okay? Death is our primary partner, And I mean, and I feel like I just learned that from a really awesome witch named Medea a couple years back. She's like, well, death is with you all the time. Like, death is your guide. And I was like, oh, and you'd think I'd know that because I had a near-death experience when I was a kid. So you'd think I'd know that, but I don't. So anyway, what you're saying is so important. Like, it really is. It has to inform us, and it has to inform us all the time because we're all going to die. The best person is going to die. The worst person is going to die. We're all going to die.
We're all gonna and that's why I love death. It's this great equalizer, and it's like the enforcer of justice in the sense, right? But the death holds us accountable to life.
Yeah.
Death holds us accountable to life, and so I always tell my clients that. And like, I had a client recently too, and I love the kitchen tabletop readings. Like like when I go and visit home, my mom often has like a girlfriend come over, and she's like, kind of like, let's look at what my child kind of can do. Like, she kind of like shows me off a little bit. I'm like, okay, well, let's, it's fine. And I love it. And it's so great.
Because she's proud.
She's proud. And then also because like the Latino community is like scared of tarot, like just culturally in a sense, because of Catholicism and like that whole baggage. And so like slowly kind of one by one, like being like, hey, it's actually really powerful. And not about like, possession or whatever else. But had death come up, and her partner actually did have like, was dealing with like life-threatening disease, but because of that confrontation that death forced upon them, they like transformed their life. Like, he became like much more gracious and like cherishing and like just not wasting his time in a sense, because death kind of like motivated that ass, and it transformed the relationship. And so we were able to like look far beyond that and be like, and she was kind of down for the ride too. My student actually she was like, yeah, I see death riding along with us in life. Like, that's why they're on a horse, because they just kind of ride with us through life,
It's the truth. That's the truth. I pulled out the death card just to because like, this is from them, the famous deck that a lot of us use. I think as a teacher, you use this deck too, don't you, Chris? Yeah, it's a good one. It really is a good one. But like, that's kind of what's in this card, is that great equalizer thing you said. Because you see under the horse, there's a king. The horse is about to take that Pope down, and that kid and that woman. So like, it's just like, it's the great equalizer. You can be anything. You can be a kid, you can be a king, you can be this small innocent child, you can be this man of God, like whatever, and death will come for you when it wants to. And so yeah, the great equalizer, indeed. Yeah, it's intense, right?
It's so intense. Seeing the gaze, I'm like, it's very that almost like what I saw on the show. Like, the bereaved, it's what it comes up to me, the death. Like, we see all of those in the wake, and then how do you just be with that loss? Like, it's like life is so raw up at that edge point of death, like that's like the most potent part.
Well, and it completes you in this way too, that I think is like, there's a saying, that something that people say, I don't know if it's a saying, but people say it. They're like, don't ever get a tattoo of a band until everybody in it is dead. Because you don't know what they're going to do, right? Like, what if you had a Smith tattoo and then like Morrissey's out there like, hi, I'm a Ku Klux Klan member, or whatever he's doing, right? You'd be like, oh my God. Right. But I like to use that example because the whole point is saying, like, really up until death, it's at the point that you're gone. It's like, okay, your life is complete. Death completed you. And so like, now we can really look back and have this whole picture of who you were. Like, anytime somebody dies, it feels like a part of them you didn't know when they were alive, because you do. And like, and that's, you know, so there's this completion that comes with death that I think is fascinating. Like, you're all contained now. So like, all of us, up until we die, we're really not this complete picture. We're really not complete people in a way. And that really, that idea really fascinates me a lot. I got, let's see, wait, John Aside is saying that he's pretty sure he's immortal because so far so good. I mean, you can't take that away. I mean, that's true. That's true, John. I mean, so far so good. You don't know till you know, do you? Right.
I mean, death is that writer who has conquered death in a sense. Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're like, I'm still going. Like, death is death.
Yeah.
Like, where's death to death? Like, you know what I mean? Like, what brings death to death? No, I love that.
Ooh, I like that one.
You know, I love that. I'm like thinking about, I don't have any tattoos, but my brother is getting them like left and right, and I'm like, whoa. It's just sort of, and he's pretty like fan core or whatever about what he's gotten tattoos about, so I love that for him. But I'm just like, whoa, I'm always so like the permanence of it, and what if I change was always the thing. I'm like, what if I don't? I'm not into that. But
yeah, no, and that's, I mean, most people who have a lot of tattoos will have, you know, will be like, well, no, there's a couple of them I could live without. That's true.
That's like the punk or whatever hard part that they're down for that I'm not, like, I'm not that. It's not my tone. But I love the completion part of what you're saying about death, and that is so comforting to me. And I do think that is something that tarot, like, what is offered to tarot readers or people who read for themselves or just are into that sphere of completion, of knowing, like, I'll pull that card and be like, I am closing in a finality type of sense, like this previous chapter of myself, this previous shell of who I thought I was, and there's more beyond that. Like, there's a new horizon, right? And I don't know that that's something that's necessarily in everyone's worldview in terms of just recognizing that there are like pivotal changes that will just like change either trajectory of the course of your life, or will just like, there's more to your own life than you can even envision within like the shell of your previous experience, you know? And again, like sitting with tarot, I think it's powerful for that way, because it just like keeps like the door open of like, hey, you might die at any moment, and not, yes, like literal death, but like also, you know, in this other way where it's like life can totally transform, and that's
on a dime.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in ways that you just like had no idea. You know, I mean, you can get very, very ill. You know, I had a friend this year who just became suddenly, you know, very ill and almost died, you know, out of nowhere, right? Just going along with your life. You're not old, you're not sick. And then all of a sudden, oh, it turns out here you are, you're in ICU, you know? And she made it. She might be out here somewhere. But yeah, but I mean, I know that's experience that changed her life. And then, you know, but it can really just, you know, I mean, that whole thing of like, you really don't know is so real, you know? So, and everybody knows it, but you can't live with it and think about it constantly, because you won't be able to live your life. There's this level where we have to believe, you know how they say like, well, you never think it'll happen to you, whatever it is. And I'm like, no, you're right. If I think that it's all going to happen to me, I'm going to get mugged, carjacked, set on fire, shot. If I think that's all out there about to happen to me,
right?
How do I move forward? Yeah, I have to live in some kind of a delusion that it's never going to happen to me. You better believe it.
Okay, come on now, like the guys and protection and the healing light and all this, all of it, full on,
yeah.
Because a lot has already happened to me. You know what I mean? Because there has been near-death experiences, and I am still here. So
right.
You know.
Were they when you were a kid, or you?
They were when I was a kid. Yeah. Which also I'm kind of grateful for too, just in terms of like, I don't know, there wasn't like a full cognition thing around like narrative building. I was just like, it just was part of. It's like, oh yeah, that was something I went through and experienced. Oh yeah, that happened. Yeah. Whereas, I mean, there have been other. Yeah, go ahead. No, you go ahead.
Well, I mean, I know how it changes you. And it happened when I was a kid, happened to me when I was a kid, and I was a young kid. So like I've spent, you know, my whole life but I was old enough to know that it changed me, if that makes sense. So,
I mean, like, I don't know, you can't really see, but I have like a scar, on my head, it's like flipped. You can't really see,
Because it's so moisturized.
Because it's so moisturized, and I am on just microneedling facials to lighten up the scar. But it's almost that too, like where I don't remember me before the scar, which is like a reminder of like my near-death experience in a sense, because I was so young.
Okay.
Um, so that's also, I don't know, like yeah, there was like a whole full like, nope, you need this, but like your life is gonna just be kind of like with the scar. You know what I mean? Which is intense. It sounds kind of heavy, but it's not like I
I
don't know. I
get
see.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I get
Yeah.
it. Yeah, I do. Yeah, interesting. So, let's we'll switch gears a little bit, and I wanted to ask about the way that you're, because you teach, and I know you do like you'll do the ones and you'll do the twos, right? And I think you're on
Yes.
tens right now. Are you doing a
Yes.
tens class right now? Okay.
I am doing tens right now, which is like so I love it. I'm kind of like the tarot just works me. I'm like, okay, I'll do it this way and then I'll cut it that way. Like I would like to cut it up kind of like every which way, you know? So thresholds is like the primary one, which we do go numerically. So like we'll group them like all the aces and like the magician and the wheel of fortune in 1 week. And then like
Mhm.
two high priestess and like on and on, right? Then I
Mhm.
added an extension which goes like through each suit, like ace through 10. And then now tens is a play on, it's like the 3 cards of the astrological season So decans. So a decan is a 10 degree of space of the zodiac. So like 10 plus the Z, and it's very like tens because decanic dignity, which is an assessment of a planet's I like to think of dignity in like this old ancient way that the ancient thought of dignity is in terms of like marginalization or privilege. Like a planet is in an environment and it's either resource and able to like do its natural aims in terms of like Venus and make love and attract relationships and what have you, or it's an environment where it's really challenged to do so. And so a lot of that assessment of dignity comes from circumstances outside of us, whereas decanic dignity is about the individual's sort of own self-affirmment and autonomy and self-regard, and it's very queer and it's very like walking the path. And so it's like we go through the minors, like the 3 cards of the season plus the major parents, as I like to call them, that like
Mhm. I like
for
that.
instance, like the 2 of Swords is Moon in Libra, so we'll look at the 2 of Swords, the High Priestess, and Justice. And we'll like meditate on those, and then we'll go through the 3 of Swords and the World and Justice, and then the 4 of Swords, the Wheel of Fortune and Justice. And so
Oh,
we kind of
how cool.
yeah, it just
Yeah.
started. I'm so excited for it. It's like it feels so great. Like I love it so much.
That's so creative, and that's so like you're finding so many dynamics there, like so many dynamic relationships between the cards, because that's what it's all about, right?
Right. Right.
And that's what like you're really seeking them out though. You're like, what happens? I don't know. It's almost like what if tarot was a reality show and you're like, what happens when we put 4 characters in a house of tens and read them by the Libras or like whatever.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. That is that is so. I'm like, ooh, let's see. And it is that. And so we'll look like in the live class more to the ancient delineate. It's like it's more of an astro tarot mix class. Like it's a bit more intermediate. So
Hmm.
we'll look at what the Picatrix says, or like all these ancient texts say about the decans themselves. Then we'll look at the cards, which I've then like last year did a decan walk and read each of them through non-tarot books or like non-woo like feminist texts or queer texts or like indigenous texts and like
Wait,
compare them.
how'd you do this? Explain it. Go tell me step by step how you did it.
So like I started this like I didn't it built, but last year, are you familiar with the Deccan Walk in terms of what a Deccan Walk is?
No, no,
Okay.
you gotta tell me.
Okay. Okay. A Deccan Walk, T. Susan Chang, which she writes 36 Secrets, which is like the tarot companion to Austin Coppock's 36 Faces. Again, each of the minor arcana are paired to a 10-degree segment of time
Okay.
within the zodiac, right? And so you get
Uh-huh.
36 cards for like 3 times 12, right? Of each. So you basically like right now we're in what is the sun right now? We're sorry, I believe we're still in the first decan of Libra, meaning that first 10 degree, like the sun is at like 8 or so degrees of Libra, or so. Don't quote me. Maybe we're in the second, and so anyhow, that's the 2 of Swords. And so like I would sit with the 3 cards of the season And I would sort of, it was kind of hard, it was challenging because it would come up obviously monthly, cyclically, in terms of like, okay, I've agreed to this sort of commitment. And I'd be open to, like, I would just kind of ask for inspiration from the universe to send me a text that read the cards, but without like meaning to read the cards. So for instance, All About Love is by Bell Hooks, is my Libra. And it just speaks to like the progression of 2, 3, 4 and swords. Ridiculously. And it was uncanny how it kept happening each season. Like there'd be times I'm like, where's the text? Because I don't want to like force it. Do you know what I mean? Necessarily. But then there would be lines where I'd read them. I'm like, this is like almost the exact description of, or like this could be, this is so the read for the card. And so I kind of went more forward, like future, like experimental in my own like like what I offer the students. And then we look more backward in our live class, and we just kind of like have fun and like mix it all up and see what comes from it.
Wow, this is so cool. I love this so much. So you're bringing in all of these like all of these intense like theory readings.
Yes.
I love, I love that.
It's pretty intermediate. It can be a little academic. I'm just like increasing. I just want to advocate literacy in all forms and all ways. And so, that's pretty much
that's right. And that's been, I know, like decolonization, decolonizing these things is definitely somewhere that you're really coming from with all of this. And it's very important. That's a very important topic. And I've always appreciated the way that you have like actively went, across thresholds, right? That's the way you put it a lot. You've actively done that with, with your practice as a professional, and then also like online and offering, for a while, I know you were offering just kind of like free, classes, but it was more like talking to different folks, really fascinating people. And that was a very cool series that was going on for a while. And I just like really appreciate your approach to that. And then like bringing all this other stuff in, because this is like what you're saying is so interesting. I love what you're doing, and I've never tried anything like this before. But I'm back here reading all my stuff too. Like in my head, I've got all of this. Like I have all of that, like feminist text, the decolonization. I've got all of those things in the back of my mind, and I'm bringing it to my readings all the time. But I haven't really combined them like that. Which is interesting in our time and place too, when what you and I are doing is so different from the main flow of like new age, where you find a lot of people are drawn to. I think it can be easy to be drawn into that, and for better or for worse, right? But it's just something that it feels soft, it feels easy, it feels non-threatening, it feels healing, and you kind of flow into that. When this is really like such a different, like what we're talking about with tarot is really coming from I don't know. I feel like we're coming from a different place than that. I don't feel like I'm saying this well, but you know what I'm saying.
No, absolutely. You're saying it totally. I mean, and it's red read for a reason, for in terms of like red being a little bit more incendiary or a little bit more contra, like all the ways you want to read red. You know what I mean? It's like there. Yeah. And so I feel that, and I mean, I was so honored and happy to have you be part of that series, and
it was fun.
Saturn is going into my 11th, which I felt like that was more of an 11th house activation for me. And it's hard for me to share more. Like sometimes I've been having to follow a lot of people on social media. I mean, who doesn't, right? Just periodically, just like kind of cleaning it up. Because it becomes sort of formulaic and like market based or whatever, like, the algorithm like dictates like how people post or how they share or whatever. And I just like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, I need to turn that off and literally like put on Toni Morrison talking about like anything, you know what I mean? Like, it just needs to hear, like, I need to hear that. Like,
like I ate waffles in Cape Cod, and you're like, tell me about it. Go tell me about it. Out. Yeah.
And so like my class spaces, I have been investing a lot more into that, which is like I share, but obviously like you have to kind of be in the class space to like, fully get the fruit of like all my kind of harvesting and laboring. But I do hope that like, once Saturn goes into my 11th house and I finish my Saturn return, there'll be more of like that connecting with others again in that way of like,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, sharing more so. But it was like I need to have my own leg to stand on. Like I really wanted these to be not surface level connections that I was making, but really
Yeah,
like embodied, like deep connections that do help
absolutely.
people decolonize and like reclaim a
Do.
spirituality that isn't appropriating and like, yeah, very new agey, which it's like, oh, everyone has a tarot deck or a crystal or whatever else, and it's like,
Right.
yeah, so yeah.
Yeah, because it's not pulling us back from the edge. That's the main thing about some of those veins of
Mm,
thinking in this way. It's not pulling us back from like it's just not it's still very like if you believe enough, then you can also have buckets of money, and it's like I don't wait, what?
right.
That's a little what a weird thing to say.
Yeah.
But anyway, and I'm not trying to go off on anybody. It's just like tarot is deeper than that. We can
Mhm,
make it deeper than that. It's a tool. I mean, Carl Jung picked it up, and made depth psychology out of it. You know
mhm,
what I mean? Using it as a tool for his own purposes. In
mhm,
terms of like where it comes from originally, it's kind of a fluke, in my
mhm,
opinion. Nobody's exactly sure
mhm,
how it got to be what it is.
right.
But it's a fluke. I feel like I'll be vindicated in the afterlife on that one. They'll be like, you were right about that tarot thing. So we can use it as a tool ourselves. And I feel like you do that. And I feel, and like too, in terms of like that series that you did, like you can't do everything all the time forever. Of course,
Right,
you teach for a little while and then, you have a platform where like one thing is working, but like you said, the platform you were doing it on changed. That wouldn't
right,
work there anymore anyway.
right,
But plus you can't do that all the time. That's a series that you do. You come back to it later. You come back to this class later,
right.
because I'm definitely not teaching all the time. I love to teach when I'm doing it. And then when I get through like a series or two, sometimes I'll layer series on top of each other, but I'll
Mhm,
usually be doing them at the same time. Like I'll have like a 6-week class and maybe a 3-week class, and maybe I'll teach like a couple of writing workshops. I'll do them all at once because
mhm,
once I take my teacher hat off,
mhm.
I don't want to go back for a few months. And it's not because I don't love teaching. It's because
Right,
like I just did a whole bunch of teaching and now I'm going to not do
right.
that. Now I'm going to read a bunch
Absolutely.
of cards, or I'm going to do a bunch
Mhm,
of writing. So,
mhm.
yeah. Yeah, so I'm definitely very interested in your class. I plan to take one of your classes at some point in time, so you'll
Oh
see
my
me.
god! I'd be like so excited, but also kind of shy, and also like, oh my god, okay, let me test my
Yeah.
metal here, or whatever.
Yeah, well, I mean, you definitely are talking about things. I mean, like, I definitely don't know the astrology. And like, I gotta tell you, I've tried to learn astrology now a few times. And just recently, I'm like, just stop, Michelle. Just ask astrologers because you don't get it. Just give it up. I made a couple of earnest efforts, but then for sure at the first sign of trouble, I have abandoned astrology. And so like, which is not true of other things in life. I'll hit that challenge. I'll be like, I'm up for it. But with
Yeah.
astrology, I'm like, okay, you know what? You catch me
Yeah.
next.
It's all right. It's a lot. No, it's a lot, and the community can be a lot, and I mean, even though the community can be a lot,
Community
it's a
can be
thing.
a lot. It's just let's just stop right there. That should be a
Right.
t-shirt.
Right. And I mean, that's why I think I'm more like forward facing with tarot being part of like my like I feel more spaciousness in like presenting tarot and teaching tarot. Again, there's like like I'm an astrologer and I've studied and I get it. Um, but I just feel that a lot of people like I don't know, I just feel like more able to break rules in a sense with tarot
Mhm.
or just like um yeah, I just love tarot. It just feels so much more
Yeah.
intimate. It's like helps me like I tweeted something, I saw you liked it, but it was like hold myself accountable to where I think sometimes astrologers can be like, oh, this is like this planet thing is happening and
Oh.
everything's terrible, or like once that moves, then everything's gonna be great, and it's so fatalistic. Where the cards help me turn the key from fate into destiny, where I'm like, okay, I'm acknowledging in a clear way, like this is the circumstance, like this is what you're working through. It's an uphill or whatever it is, but it's also like you have option, you have space here, you have a response here. And so the cards help me show up in that way, where it's yeah.
I love that, because that makes sense, right? Because it's all in the stars with astrology. With the tarot cards, you're like, well, what should I do here? Yeah,
Mm.
turn over. What should I do here on this? Turn over some cards about that. They'll be like, well, what do you want?
Right.
Like, I can't. Gonna have to tell me, what do you want? And what are your strong suits? What are your weaknesses? Like, how are we gonna get there? I mean, I can help you, but like,
Mhm.
whatever you want to do, that's what we got to deal with. And I can see where astrology is not like that, and that's what I like to tell people too, is I'm like, well, we might be able to kind of assess what we think is going to happen in the future based on how things are now, but anything can come between now and then, and
Right.
that can't be accounted for. So like,
Right.
yeah, maybe the cards can tell you what's going to happen if nothing gets in the way of that, or nothing changes, but something's going to change.
Right.
So,
And but then how do you respond when that happens is mainly my
yeah,
focus. You know what I mean? It's
yeah,
like yeah. So
yeah.
I don't think Astro like centers that all the time. You know what I mean? But
I get you. I don't know why that's such a revelation to me, but it is. I'm gonna pull a card, and we're gonna talk about what's in the card. Okay?
okay.
Sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. This will be a little something in this one for everyone. All right, here we go. Let's see what it is.
Oh,
Judgment.
no heavy, no sleeping, no sleeping here.
So what's one of the things that comes to your mind for judgment?
I just like hear it. It's just like bum, ba, bum. Like I don't know. I just it's so that card is so auditory to me. You know, I really do try and like cue like the cards as cues.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been several times where I pull judgment and it's like that man on the street who's like, revelation is coming, you know what I mean? Like, get your shit in order. And like literally seeing that, but also being in music halls where I'm like, I just need to sit in front of my Marshall speaker and turn my like my gospel basically music all the way up and like, let my soul awaken in a sense. And there's yeah, this is alarm. I feel very like the like awake, like it's just like wake up, wake up, like wake up. Sorry, that
Yeah.
other songs come into my mind. Like it just becomes so like this spiritual sort of alarm clock, where there's a message that just like stirs you from your sleep. And it's like if you can't sleep at night, maybe it's because God or your higher self or whoever is trying to tell you something.
Right. Oh, I love that. Yeah. I mean, this is always it's such an antique word in a lot of ways,
Mm,
judgment. And that's another thing. People like see that word more than the picture on this card, and they're like, oh no. And I'm like, it's not that though. This is
mm,
actually really such a positive card.
mm,
You really see like literally like dead bodies coming up out of coffins. So it's like I always take this card. I love that. It's interesting. Okay, it's interesting that you're talking about it being like auditory, because when I very first started reading cards, like it's been a long time ago now. It's been like 20 years ago now. But I was very new to it, and I remember like just being really like blown away by this card when I was like cell phones, which were not everybody even had cell phones then, right? And I'm like, and I remember telling some friend, like I thought I was so smart. I'm like, there's something about cell phones in this card, or whatever, which I still kind of will be like, you're going to get a call, or whatever. So I won't,
right.
right? So the auditory, like, I get that, in this, and this, like, calling you upward. So, like, I
Mhm.
did understand the card. You know what I mean by saying that? I
Right.
did
Oh, full
understand
on.
the card, right? More than I realized at the time, but it wasn't like I wasn't innovating anything. Okay, y'all. Um, and you don't need to, you really don't. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think this like it's the calling you up to up, whatever, it's
Right.
hierarchical, but to a better part of yourself. But sometimes too, like if I find, like say I'm having a reading with somebody who's like they're getting a divorce,
Mm,
and like they're going through all of that, which is very complicated, but it's just, and like say I got this, and I could be like, the whole thing about this is once you're gone, like these parts of yourself that have died in that terrible marriage
mm,
are not gone. And they're going to all this, it's going to come back to you, And I also just kind of feel like this card has that, like, it's if you're available to be pulled up, and this is where that accountability thing comes in, right?
mm,
If you're
mm,
available to be pulled up to
mm,
this, that's the key. Like the hand of God, you know, like anytime I say God, y'all, I'm speaking very loosely.
Same.
But like, yeah. So, but like the hand of God is not going to come down and pick you up by your hair and put you where you need to be, right? It's just like if you, you know, can find your self-esteem and your worth, and you can be kind to people, you know, and like believe and all, you know, and do, you know, put effort into it or whatever, and just let go of hurting yourself in so many ways, you will find this gentle lift that'll help you through things. So I feel like there's a little bit of this card in here for everybody here today. So it's just like, I don't know, like, yeah, have faith, listen for the call, right? I guess that's what I would say.
Yeah, I love that. I do that too. Like, I mean, I was watching. I go so like I think so imagistically, and sometimes like just a snippet of something, I'll be like, oh, that's that card or that archetype, or what have you. But it was like the Venus and Serena Williams movie, which was more of like King Richard or something. But he took the father, kind of made like kept them from professional competition for so long, and then like at the end of at the end of the movie, it was like on the announcer like. And now stepping up, right, is like Venus, Serena Williams, and like you don't want to be not that you're like, oh shit, that's my competitor, you know what I mean? And so I think of this card as this like, your destiny is there, like your calling is there, like, and they were like, oh, am I gonna miss this? Like this is so in me, like why aren't we competing and all of these things? Like why are we practicing and like sort of if what can feel like being held back, but there's a process of development and maturation happening, but then it's like it's just kind of like that announce like you that over the loudspeaker, you know, being like and now stepping to the stage, now presenting, you know, it's a sort of like well, I don't know, debutante, but like this sort of reveal of like this like newer aspect of self. Like it's here. It's like finally ready to emerge from the darkness. You know, all that like hidden work you're doing can now come out of the closet. You know what I mean? And in this sense, like, solidified enough that it can walk on its own now and like go forth into new life. And so and then you become a badass and you become like, you know, you claim your destiny. And that's what it's like claim your shit, you know? It's like that's for you. What's for you is for you.
Damn. I love that. I love that you brought those two in too, especially like Serena Williams, like literally the greatest tennis player who's ever lived.
Like,
I mean, there you go. Right. Yeah. And took that time and came up to that calling. I love that. I love that example. You want to pull a card?
I was just about to say, like, can I pull a card?
Yeah, pull a card. Maybe I'll read from Daydream Tarot. So this is my book. Everybody probably knows this is my book, but we like to. Yeah, there's Chris. I'm trying. You know, we're kind of talking about this book whenever we get together for tarot on my channel.
I mean, well, okay, I'll pull a card too, but then I do have questions about the book for you.
Okay. Okay, I like that. That's good.
Got a card for the people, please.
For the peoples. This is for everybody's gonna get something out of this. Anybody who's listening.
Oh, the Five of Cups.
Oh, look at that guy. Oh, yep. All right.
Yep.
He's been not coming up in my personal readings as much as of late, but he's around me.
Same.
Yeah. So let's see. I'm gonna read what I wrote in this book. So, let's see. I say grief, and it spikes to unbearable, and then crashes like a wave and rolls out again. 3 cups are spilled, 2 remains. There is loss, and there is what continues. So that's the basic reading of that card. And here's the meditation that I wrote on it. Grief does not make a straight line through loss. The stages of grief spiral and replay and generally refuse linearity. We are gifted by the capacity for love on a plane of existence that is marked by both death and free will, both of which will create loss. We will lose our parents and our pets to death if things go according to the basic plan. Some will lose children and significant others to death by disease or accident or street crime or war. Some will lose limbs and lovers and friends and sanity. Entire cultures may be decimated to rubble and shifted across lands where neither the remaining people nor their customs are welcome. And these are just the big events that cause pain and grief. We experience more basic daily grief too. We might feel we have lost the will to rise from bed to face the petty affront of office politics or the constant complaint of neighbors who simply dislike us. Notice your tiny grief doing just let your big grief chomp on so that it can grow into one big rat king of pain. Grief comes in waves and it comes for as long as it comes. It comes for as long as it comes, forever if that's what it needs. But the waves roll out again. And if we are wise, we give to others during this time. Grief is universal, it occurs in all living beings. May we allow grief to do its great work in connecting our spirits. So, yeah, I didn't hold back on that one, did I? I was like, oh, okay, I went there in this book. All right. I'm like, I went on and on. I'm like, crime, war, disease,
King rats, dead.
What am I talking about? but that's what you all know what a king rat is. You gotta watch out for that with your grief. You gotta let it flow in and out.
I'm just it just fits on so many. It just like I don't know why rats have been like in the fields sort of recently, like not in my house thankfully, but like I'm hearing of rats, and so like here's like another instance of like hearing of rats and these things. So like I clear them out. Let's feel your grief.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you went there, and again, I love the book because it's so like I love that you have notes there. I love that you have the meditation, the reversal, but also sort of the like takeaway, immediately, like here's like the one or two lines and then you kind of like go into it. And so again, I love that so much.
Thank you.
This 5 of Cups, I mean, feel your grief, y'all. I feel that. I totally feel that. And I think of this card in relationship to the 4 of Cups as well, in so much that I think like so often we want to have this cloak of protective covering on from the hard emotions, but then when you do that, you can't pick and choose what emotion, like if you cut yourself off from your emotional capacity, you're doing so, you're limiting your capacity to feel those positive emotions as well in that 4 of Cups or what have you. It's like you see that same principle kind of working on both ends of the cards where like one of my favorite poems that I often associate with this is The Joy at Sudden Disappointment by Rumi.
Okay.
And it's kind of like when these moments of like grief happen or when this like unexpected loss kind of comes to you, like sort of refrain from immediate interpretation of like, oh, dramatizing. And like, of course, I mean, when you experience loss, like it can be terrible, but there's just like, I think of that old story where it's like, oh, my son broke his leg. What a tragedy. And everyone's like, what a tragedy. And then like the war people come the next day and like, or, conscripting people and like, he can't go because his leg is broken. So like, oh, what a blessing. And then it's kind of like, well, who knows? Like, let's keep going. And then it's just kind of this process of like, who knows what's a disappointment and who knows what is actually like a saving grace. And I think of this card of like, get it. The water might be really fucking cold. Like it might be really, really icy cold. And that is grief, but there's something that is purgatory. There is something that like just on the other end, like you keep flowing through and you just broaden your capacity, I think, of emotional, of emotionality. And so I see this as that invitation to grieve, obviously.
Yeah, I love this because I think that's really the truth. There's so I think maybe most of us have known someone or met someone who just, they and you understand it. It's not like you don't understand it, but they get hard around their grief, right? And they stop flowing into the world, right? And there's this, cynicism, bitterness, all these things. You can't, I'm like, I get why you're doing that. And like, I'm so sorry because like now, like, now you got another grief, which is like that hardness, right? Whereas like that flowing into everything, that's like what's in the book too, is it's like it's universal. Like give to others, like in a way I don't want to say like, you just lost a parent or something and like you need to get out there and volunteer. That's not what I'm saying. But I mean like share your grief with other people too in whatever way that and touch, like you can touch everyone in the world in a way through your grief that we can't do in our triumphs and in our joys. Those are things that don't happen to everybody. Grief he does. So you can touch everyone who's ever lived through their grief, through grief. So yeah. Oh, and one other thing I do like to say about it too, because we like to think that it's, like certain kinds of grief, they don't ever like end in your lifetime. Like some things you'll get through, some griefs you'll get through, and you'll kind of forget about it. You'll process it and it'll be okay. And some things are going to always come back to you in one way or another. But the thing I think is really important to remember is that grief, it hits that point where you're like, I can't take this. And the thing is like, that's true, which is why it flows back out. Right. So you get this big wave and you're like, oh, I can't live like this. And that's true. And that's why it goes back out. It might come back in, but you can always handle that wave, that spike. You just brace yourself and it's going to flow back out. That spike will flow out. And I think that's I feel like that's really important. That's been a really important thing for me to understand in my life when I hit points in grief where I was like, I can't live. Like I'm in too much pain. I can't live. And then I was like, oh wait, it doesn't stay. I'm not going to stick. It's going to come back, but I won't stick next time either. And I think that's super important because we all, I don't know, like, what are you going to do if you can't stay? You're going to hand grief to somebody else, right? So,
I love the bracing yourself in a sense. Like that's how I use the cards as well in terms of, like they help me brace myself for whatever, like they are uncanny, whether it's like in my field with people I'm talking to or something I'm like, I would see this. I'm like, okay, I need to like sit with grief, or I may like feelings of grief may come up today. There may be a wave of grief today. Let me just like brace myself for that. Like, let me just orient, or around that a little bit today. And knowing, because I have a daily practice, I pull in the morning. Tomorrow, and I see it just through tomorrow things can shift and the waves will keep going. But I do, and I see this, like many people talk about the 2 cups behind the figure. There's always like the cliche, like, oh, there's still more there. Like just like as if it was just so easy to just like turn around and be like, well, here's all the stuff. Like, you know what I mean? Like, here's like, I lost my mother, my father, my lover, whatever, but like, hey, these people are still alive in my life, which is like, yes, obviously true, but it's I think that's a little bit too easy and too simple.
It's not too simple. Yeah, it's too simple. That's right. It's much too simple.
So I see those cups more like within grief is also unconscious desire. Like there is something like maybe longing, like that we're longing for that we can't even, like we don't even know. Like you still have more desire in you than you're even fully consciously recognizing at this time. And so like inquiring even into grief, like sometimes you will have grief without a pointed loss. Like sometimes like why am I grieving? Like no one's died around me or whatever. You don't like have like a conscious thing. Whereas like you probably have experienced loss, obviously. We experience loss, but sometimes we don't register it or we don't validate it as like a grief when it's not like a literal death,
Right.
And so I didn't pull this card yesterday, but I was very much like sitting with my grief yesterday and just like trying to like it's like trust, like for your emotions to open up to you. I think there needs to be trust there, and I think that just requires like sitting with them and being
treating
with them,
treating
them. Like if the child is crying or grieving, it's not like, it's like, well, why are you crying? Like, you know what I mean? Like typically there's a need there. Typically there's some information there. There's like a reason there. And I just think that like there is an unconscious kind of part to the card as well.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that. I'm gonna be thinking about that a lot. And and too, for people these days, like we have griefs that are not as close to us like they used to do. You are people, Genocide.
That's right. What I saw right now too. Yeah.
So we might have friends that are like I have a lot of friends that are online friends or people I haven't met in real life that I care about a lot, and so we have grief like that, but you also might have somebody like on your social media that like you don't really necessarily know them. You don't really interact with them off their feed. Like maybe you comment on their things or share their stuff, but you really look forward to what they're putting out, on Twitter or Facebook or whatever. And then they die. And that's this modern thing, and you suddenly realize how much you miss this person who you didn't really know. You don't really know their family. Your friends around you don't really know them. So we have this, can we call that grief? And I just want to say yes, we absolutely can. And it's a very modern, very special kind of grief. But when that person suddenly is not on your Twitter feed anymore, and every day they just offered you some little thing, or you just were happy to see their little avatar, and suddenly you feel this, you're like, I can't believe how empty I feel and how lost I feel without this or whatever. I just want to say, I see you, I get you. That's a modern grief, and getting our mind around it. We don't know how to do it yet. But we're going to figure it out, and that you are 100% entitled to grieve that. And that however you grieve in your life, that's probably going to happen. If you have a little bit of loss of appetite, if you get cranky, whatever, your wife, husband, partner, whatever might not know that you're going through this, and you might feel weird about saying it, right? But now you're snapping at everybody. Now you're snapping at the kids, you're yelling at the dog, or whatever, and you're being an asshole, And hopefully we figure out a way to say, I lost somebody on Twitter, and I feel like shit, and I'm going to be cranky, and you need to, keep that dog in the other room, or whatever it is, whatever's going on. So I want to just say that too.
Full on. And I just love it. I like what you're saying, and I like what we're talking about here, because so often grief is isolating, often it's so isolating, but we're more so and what you wrote so beautifully is it can inspire on the opposite end, solidarity of sorts. You're like, oh shit, this is actually something everyone feels. And so
yes,
it can almost be that too, where I'm like, okay, I do feel connected to a greater collective. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm grieving for and with others, even if I'm grieving alone in my own room or whatever. You know what I mean? I know that there's a shared component there.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I think that's hugely important in my life when I've been grieving, to just be well, this is the soul of life right here. How about this? Let's each pull a card, and these will be cards. This is what we should all look for in our upcoming week. How does that sound?
Yes.
Oh, and Eileen yells at the TV and YouTube mostly. I think that's very healthy, Eileen. I'm going to be honest with you.
Well, on that note, Eileen, with the loss, quote unquote, or the release of emotion, that's catharsis, so there you go. This is a card of catharsis.
There you go. Let it out, Eileen. Let it out.
All right. So cards for what to expect or what to prepare for. How did you phrase it?
I was saying, what we should look for in our upcoming week. Do you like that?
Yes.
All right. Okay. This is for everybody watching this. Whenever you watch it, just your upcoming week, you're going to look for this. All right. I didn't look at it yet, though. We'll reveal it together.
Okay. You ready?
Ready? Okay, here we go. Wait, where's mine? Ooh, I got strength. Ooh, you got the King of Pentacles? Nice.
Damn. Yes, here we are.
Damn.
Okay, sorry. I'm in a strength meditation this week, actually, so that's very fitting for me. So I love
that. I love it. Both of these cards have that golden sky in it too. So both of these cards have this really clear consciousness, which has been lately a lot. Some of my ideas about things have changed, and my consciousness has felt really clear. And I've been I didn't really catch that, and I didn't really catch that before, but I feel like that's changing, and it's because of the clarity that I'm having. So we got those golden consciousness skies here.
Yeah. There's a natural component, obviously, being related to very bountifully and beautifully here. There's a trusting of the nature, obviously, with our own beasts, with our own desires, with our own animal body, and then the ways that we sort of invest that into our time, into our sense of self-worth, into what we have to offer each other. There's I like this. I really love this for people to be on the lookout for, some more solid foundation, for some clarity coming. Mercury station directs today, I don't know, early in the morning. And so there has been a lot of kind of Neptune dizzying confusion action happening, but there's also, I think, this what I love about the King of Pentacles, and strength is major, so I'll bow to you for that. But the spiritual component of the physical, you know, of like this King of Pentacles, I feel like has a solid sense of value. You know, they know what they value, they know what they invest in, and that comes not just from like that diamond is worth however much. It comes from like, no, this life is worth this much, like regardless, and they invest in that, you know.
Yeah. Oh, I love that.
Yes.
Yeah. I yeah, for strength this week, like just looking for like how, like what do we mean by strength? Because we don't mean force, you know. So it's like what is it to be like strong for another person? Like how far do you let that go, right? You can't take care of other people forever, but they need support, and sometimes we need support that's hard to give, you know. So to look for all of that, so to look for where, I don't know, I feel like to look for where our gentleness and our ability to sit through hard conversations is really what makes us strong, is a lot of what I would say in this week.
Yes. And I would say that doing that hard work, like that, those moments where you're like, oh shit, that was a courage, like it took courage for me to address this thing with this person, gives you a sense of self-respect, gives you a sense of self-worth. King of Pentacles.
Nice. Yeah.
I feel that full on. Like I really feel that.
And
like,
you know,
go ahead.
I love, that goes, I want to look up that King of Pentacles in this in just a second, but I love how that goes together, because it's really, because here's another thing too, like getting the courage to like say something that needs to be said. Like if you kind of realize that like the reason you don't say it to someone is because their reaction, their response to you has trained you to not bring that to them. Or even if you don't have an experience in the past, you just know they'll get aggressive with you, right? They'll be aggressive with you. They'll come at you. They'll twist your words. They'll project. They'll say, okay, fine. Well, I guess I'm just like this then. Fine. If that's what you think of me, fine. Right? Like that's a good place to stop yourself and be like, wait a minute. That's why I don't go to this person with this. How can I rearrange the relationship I have with this person who can't really communicate? And if you're that person who you're like, I'm a bear, you want to mess with me, you got something you want to say to me, I'm a bitch. Check yourself, check it out, because people around you are not saying things to you, and if they're not saying them to you, they're probably saying them behind your back. They're probably trying to find a way out of your life in some way, or they also might just be like, you know, they're like me and they got PTSD. They might just be at home like, oh God, please don't yell at me. 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 Okay.
Absolutely. Well, yeah.
Right. So it goes both ways. So it's not, so sometimes our lack of courage, I love courage is really what the strength card is so much about. So sometimes our lack of courage does become because of like, we've been taught, don't fuck with me.
Which all of that, and then it's the lack of self-worth. But please read to the King of Pentacles.
Yeah, let me check this guy out. What do we got in here with that King of Pentacles? Where are the pentacles in this damn book? Hang on. They're at the end where they belong.
Yes.
That is what we are all saying. Yeah, of course. He's the last thing in the book. Of course he is. I should know that. By now. Anyway, this is from Daydream Tarot by me. And this is about the King of Pentacles. So I say he's a reliable and often accomplished character with a disciplined self-control. A soft-spoken, reserved approach will generate the most saliency from others at this time. Revisit a budget or learn how to make one. That one, I like that it'll reserved approach will generate the most saliency at this time. Like, that seems true, y'all. This upcoming week, like, where can you hold back a little bit to get what you really need?
And that's, which is a budget, you know what I mean? Which is like, oh, let me.
Oh my God, it is.
It's like, how much can I budget for this person in terms of like what they're going to get out of me, and what I'm going to do.
Oh my God. See, this is why it's so important to talk about tarot, because Chris is picking up all these things. I'm like, oh my God, you're totally right. I didn't get that.
I'm so with you. No, it's so dialogic. Like that's where all the magic happens. I like have friends, of course, that I talk to the card like with about the cards, and I'm like, should we record this? You know, it's always that like natural.
Yeah.
Should we do a podcast? You know, it always goes. And I'm like, okay.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it.
This week, yeah, Eileen, this week, look for like courage and like where you can have a gentle approach. Oh, hey, John, nice to see you here. Hi, John. Good day to you. Yeah, so to see where you can, yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
To see where you can have courage, but also why you do or don't, and to see where you can have reserve your approach a little bit with people. And like, I mean, I think something that's like super important. I brought it up like on my social media this week because it came up. I actually saw it. I was thinking about the 5 parts of an apology anyway, but like it came up on my other social media, and so like I put that up on Instagram. But like there's 5 parts to an apology, and it's really, as somebody else on social media pointed out too, it's like this is really about making amends. And I think it's really important for us to understand how to do that, but also to recognize that giving and receiving an apology, a real apology, and amends is very vulnerable. Both of those things. To like give a real apology where you're like, this, I know this hurt you. This is how I'm wrong. And not just, hey, I'm sorry. Sorry that happened. Sorry you feel that way. I said I was sorry. Like, none of that really matters. Making an amends means you kind of give something of yourself to this other person. So you have to be able to trust them. And then if they're like, yeah, whatever, I'm over it, and they don't accept your apology, because it's vulnerable to make one and it's vulnerable to receive one. Because you can also say, thank you so much for that apology or whatever, and have that other person go, see, we could have taken care of this a week ago. Yeah, like that hurts. That stuff hurts. So anyway, being strong and being courageous isn't just within the self. There are reasons why you might hold back, and that might be a reason to ask yourself what's going on. So yeah, I didn't see all that coming out of me today, but it sure did. There it is.
I love it. Be on the lookout for that this week. And I would say that is an opportunity, because I mean, I do like both of these cards. Strength is like I don't know, all of them are complex and mysterious, obviously. It's kind of like I'll be in one room of the tarot or like one section of the tarot, and then I'm like, there's other ones coming up. But anyhow, I would say that that'd be an opportunity to get to the root of self-worth, and to either solidify in terms of like me giving an apology is actually exemplifying my own self-worth that maybe I didn't realize when I made the transgression, right? And then forgiveness also can be part of like, oh, like I do haven't like, oh yeah, I have enough like in terms of self-regard that I can extend forgiveness. You know what I mean? Like, okay, there is a level of generosity in forgiveness that I think the King of Pentacles is so about. And they're like, you know what? Here's some extra grapes for you. Like, go ahead. Like, it's not hurting. It's gonna help.
Yeah.
I do think that there's like, and then on the opposite end, like you were saying, like holding back from the conversation that's needed, or whatever reason can be from a lack of self-worth. Which there's a lot. There's a lot there, which is to dig into.
Yeah.
But the kings arrive at this place. The king's like, he's there chilling in his garden with that pentacle on his lap and that orb in his hand, and he's just like sort of his eyes are closed in this one and are like kind of meditation down on it.
They are.
He's sort of like sitting on something, perhaps, like, or just sitting with it for a while, letting it stew, letting, like you were saying, like don't rush the apology. Make sure you have all those components there. You might feel that strength can be real activating. You get in front of a lion and you're like, my heart is beating. I have to act now. And it's kind of like, just chill out. As you were saying, soft spoken, reserve a little bit, sit on it a little bit, and then see how it ages. You know what I mean? And then go with it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly. Thank you. I needed to hear all of that. And it is so much about like self-worth. Thank you, Jasmine. And thank you, Eileen. I'm so glad. Yeah, bust out your cards. Get some insights going on that. And I do feel like there's like a lot of like self-worth stuff going on. And I guess one of the things that like is really on my mind right now that I want to say about that when it comes to like self-worth, having self-worth doesn't mean everybody else like is gonna see it. And so like sometimes I think we have that, like, you know what I mean, like the idea that, well, if I have enough self-worth, everyone will see it. Everyone else will see my worth. And that's a little bit, that's a little new age philosophy too that's in there. It's like, well, then everybody's going to value you, but that's not true. Everybody's not going to value you ever. There's no way to do that. That's not a thing, so right. So having self-worth in a big way is saying like, well, wait a minute, not everybody is going to value me or think I have worth, and getting over that, and just recognizing that actually the only people who need to like see my worth are the people to whom with whom I'm engaging with very interpersonally, right? Because I mean, a lot of people on your job are not going to see your worth a lot of times, right? Your coworkers, your boss, they're not going to see that, or not going to see they might be like, she's really great at data entry or whatever, we really value her around here, but they're not going to know like that you're a genius like tarot card reader, or you're the greatest like pad thai chef in the history of the world, like, right? So they may not have, right? I just mean that, I hope I'm making this succinct, but I just want to say that having self-worth, part of it is to recognize not everyone is going to value you, and to realize that your only job in having self-worth is to not have friends who don't value you, right? That's it. Because you can't pick your family. Maybe you go around them, maybe you don't, maybe they value you, maybe they don't. Your job, I don't know, you can come and go from your job, maybe they value you, maybe they don't. But for people who are going to be your friends and they're going to be your lovers, like, they need to value you, and they need to see your self-worth in the same way that you do. And if they don't, then they can go. And that's not really about you. It's about them. That's my thought. Wait, let's see. We got a question. Thank you. I hope I said that good. UT spoke about Jung's archetypes in relation to the tarot. I've been wondering and toying with this idea. Can the tarot also relate to Socrates' forms? Do you have any thoughts on that? That's Socrates' forms, like Plato's forms. I guess those would be the same thing. I feel like I don't know Socrates' forms. I know Plato's forms.
I'm not familiar with. I just know Socratic teaching, but Socrates' forms is a little less familiar with that. So yeah, what are Plato's forms?
Yeah, I'm thinking like, well, if we're talking about in terms of like thought forms, that Plato, like, Plato's like thought forms. Absolutely, Jasmine. Absolutely. The tarot interplays with that, because like the idea being that the first thing that the first table that ever existed was not material. Yeah, Plato wrote about Socrates, right?
Is that like his thing where he was like, it's all in the sky, basically, like we all have the apple that like one picks down from, and it's like, and
yes,
like, okay,
yeah, because the first table was a thought. It wasn't a table. It was the thought that you had of the table. This is Plato's idea, which then he passed on to Socrates. Okay, so if every first thing is a thought form, and I think this really truly applies when it deals with like how we're dealing with other people, or how we're dealing with our own internal self, and our thoughts really are the first thing. They are a priority to the relationship, they're a priority to the action. So using tarot cards to shape how we're going to have those thought forms, absolutely, Jasmine. I feel like I do that every single day as I'm trying to like plan ahead for the next steps I want to take in whatever it is. And in my relationships too, because like sometimes, I can get like, whatever, I get my own ideas in my head. I can be a little paranoid, and I get these paranoid ideas in my head. Well, that's my thought form, and I'm going to act out that paranoia now. And I do still sometimes, but sometimes I can't help that. But like sometimes tarot cards can really help me break that paranoia down, so that my thought form about the situation or about another person shifts in such a way that I approach it all differently. And I hope that answers the question, because like it's a really good question and it deserves a good answer.
It was a really good answer.
Okay, thanks.
Same, absolutely. Just in terms of noting my thought forms, like again, the bracing of the self. Like there was one time I pulled the Nine of Swords, talking about paranoia and like thought forms and them being challenging, and I lost my ID that day while I was in San Francisco. But because I had pulled the Nine of Swords earlier, I was like, I primed my fear. Like I was like, okay, like I knew this was coming. I'm not going to freak out. I don't need to freak out. Like I looked thoroughly. I went and ordered a new one like right away. I was like so chill, and I felt like so thankful to tarot and for the Nine of Swords like coming through, because I was able to just get a breath, like a little. It gives you like a stopgap or something where you're like, okay, I can pivot a little bit before being so immediate, you know. And then for me too, the reading lingers in my mind. You know, some like there is the immediacy of the power of like the channel and what happens between either you and the cards, or like if you're getting a reading, like the words that come through. But it's like I often like walk and decompress, and like the cards sit and they spin in my mind a little bit, and um I feel they help me track my own thought process and my own thought forms as well. You know, it's like my own reading of a card I see changing over time. And so I think absolutely that they can be used in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love everything you just said. That's the best way to read those cards. Well, thank you so much for being here, Chris. This was so fun. Our time went so fast.
It went so fast. Oh my gosh. I know. It jammed by. It jammed by.
I know.
Oh my gosh.
But everybody, Chris is the Red Read, and you can find them on Twitter and Instagram, all that good stuff. You can always shoot me a DM, and I'll give you a direct link. And hopefully, I already have it in the description. If not, I'll get it in there at some point. And so people can click on there, and you do give readings, and you give them over the phone.
Over Zoom. So you get over Zoom. So you get the recorded. If you're in the San Diego area, which I don't know that anyone is here, but if you're watching, I am starting to do so in person. But yeah, and I teach, of course. And so
and you teach.
So like stay on the lookout for an open registration or whatever soon.
Yeah, I haven't taken one of your classes yet, but I'm going to. I always look at them, I'm like, and it's, you know, everybody, we're all like, wait, not this month, maybe next time.
Right,
It'll come. Yeah. Because like last time too, I saw the 10s, and I'm like, seriously, Michelle, it's got to come this, you know, this year. So, like,
I'm kind of always teaching at the moment. I know you said you like take a break.
You keep rolling.
Getting there, I'm like in this Saturn return. I'm kind of just, it's a work mode, but it's but I really do love teaching, honestly. Like I love that space with my students. I love being a long form teacher. I'm like, come on, well, like let's just journey together, you know, and like pull cards. And
me too. I will do those one-off tarot shops, and I enjoy them. But like, I'm always just like, okay, I wish. All right, well, maybe we'll all be here again together. So I love weeks, you know, when I'm like, I know we're here together for the, and you kind of commune, you know. So, but yeah, everybody, be on the lookout for Chris. Get a reading if you want a reading, and okay, bye for now.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
You're welcome. And I'm hitting that end broadcast, and we will be on.